My best friend Frank was soon to pick me up for a 4-day hunt, so I had to say goodbye to my wife. Frank loaded his pickup truck with everything he needed to hunt, dress, and transport his prey. We made sure that such preparation was the key to success. He threw back the padded bed cover and opened the locking drawer behind the cab. I put my rifle in the box beside him and my gear bag in a plastic box attached to the side. I climbed into the cab and took another look at the porch. The front door was closed. Frank pulled out of the driveway and headed toward the highway. We quickly made our way to an old cabin that had been in Frank's family for generations. The current owner was his Uncle Bob. However, Bob was no longer able to get around, and Frank became the primary user and caretaker. He has made some major improvements over the past few years, including better insulation and installing a more efficient wood stove so we don't have to huddle in the parkas all the time. For this season, he installed a satellite dish that not only broadcasts many channels, but also provides internet. "There's still no reliable cell coverage here," he said as he presented the upgrade, "but you can use WhatsApp over Wi-Fi if you want to call Maeve. You know, she doesn't expect a lot of contact, and I like to be out of touch sometimes, so I guess I won't tell her about the internet being here just yet." We'd watched SportsCenter over dinner, and now I was reading a John Sandford novel while Frank sat on his laptop. We were both sipping beers, but it was only the second of two for the evening. We weren't stereotypical yahoos, just off on a drunken boys' outing, free of our wives. We actually wanted to test ourselves against nature and hopefully refill our freezers with venison. "Oh, shit," Frank exclaimed. I closed the book, but kept my finger on my finger looking at him. I expected the exclamation to continue, but Frank's eyes were still fixed on the screen. He was clearly reading, scrolling down the page. "Holy double shit," he said. Then he tore his gaze away from the screen and stared at me with a vacant-eyed stare. Then a look of doubt appeared on his face, like maybe he shouldn't have addressed me. I put my finger on the bookmark and asked, "What's up, Frank?" Was he looking at a news site? Had my house burned down or had Maeve been in a car accident? His voice and face dropped. "Oh, shit. You'll have to see for yourself." He turned the laptop 90 degrees so it was facing the empty chair to his right. I rose from the shabby chair, crossed the dining room table, and sat down. I shifted my gaze to the screen, expecting to see a horrifying headline. It wasn't a news site. It was some kind of social networking site. On the screen was a picture of a smiling Maeve. I called her smile evil. I looked up at Frank. "What the hell? What is that?" "Sorry, Matt, but it's a dating site," he replied helplessly. "A dating site?" Shit just didn't fit in his head. "Look," he said, "you know that after Tracy and I broke up, I was in deep shit, and for 6 months or more I just sat around with nothing to do, barely holding a pen. I started checking Tinder and other sites to meet people. Women." "Meet women?" I looked at him more determinedly. "So, some of these sites kind of skip the dating and go straight to the fun stuff." Frank's voice lightened as he said, "I did manage to get laid a few times, but there are wives on there too." "Wives?" "Well, yes. There are a few wives, and a lot of husbands, who are looking for some fun on the side." I looked at the screen again. Further down the page was another picture of my wife. My gut twitched. "Mav? Hey, Matt, look, let me tell you something. I've found that there's a lot of nonsense and even fraud out there." He nodded toward the laptop. "I've come across fake profiles more than once. Profiles that use a woman's name and image without her knowledge. Maeve could be a victim. I mean, I've never seen her here or on any other site before." I mentally grasped at that straw as I examined the profile more closely. The photos definitely belonged to Maeve, but could they have been hacked from our own computer? The photo with the sly smile looked familiar to me. Then I noticed one detail that stabbed me in the heart. The outfit she was wearing in the second photo. The entire outfit cost almost $100. I knew because I had bought it for her last Christmas. That picture was less than a year old, and I didn't have time to take it. I started reading. "Can you help me with my daddy issues?" And I don't mean sugar daddy. I'm pretty sure my dad has wanted for a long time to, you know, but he hasn't. Yet. But I keep thinking about what it would have been like. Sometimes I think of my dad the way he is now, middle-aged but still hot. Sometimes I think of him as the gorgeous young man I've seen in pictures. I can even imagine a virile retired man still able to give mom more than she can handle, so of course daddy's girl would be happy to help. So no matter what age you are, if you're clean and fit the description, please send a photo and let's meet. I am alone for the long weekend, Friday through Saturday, and would love some intimate daddy-daughter time. Underneath the profile item was a box that read, "Current status, closing soon." I looked up and caught Frank's gaze. Daddy issues? What the hell? Look, this might be a good thing. He must have seen my eyebrows fly up to my hairline because he hurried to continue. No, really, dude. Some of those cheating wives I was talking about? It's not that they're unhappy with their husbands or want to leave them. Sometimes they just have a certain zest they're uncomfortable sharing with him. Maybe they want to try it with a woman or a black dude at least once. Or do they have fantasies about daddy? Said I. Frank just shrugged. I looked at the screen again and continued reading. Then I got a lump in my throat, and I must have wheezed or something because Frank said, "You found double shit." Double shit indeed. Dad's family comes from Greece and Italy, so he has a classic Mediterranean look. He has dark eyes and dark curly hair. He has a strong, straight nose, but a little Roman hump is normal. If that's you, I'm looking forward to a daddy-daughter date. And if you're 6 feet tall with the physique of a long-distance runner, it's going to be a very hot date. What? What? Actually? I know, Frank replied. I gotta say, Matt, I thought you were in on it, but the look on your face tells me otherwise. Not a damn clue, man. Not a damn clue. Frank and I were both totally confused because Maeve's father, Sean, is a pale-skinned Irishman with rust-brown hair. The description she posted on her profile didn't fit him, but it did for me. Then I got to the triple crap. Under the description of Maeve's dream, Daddy was another box that said, "Join the chat room." I started scrolling through the messages where assholes were chatting with my wife. Then one comment just struck me. "Hi, I've had a lot of time on my hands this past month. I hope you have a place for me." Almost immediately came a reply from my wife. "Oh yes, I can definitely make room for you. Write to me and let me know when I can see you again." "Did you have a good time last month?" "I can definitely make room for you." "When can I see you again?" Screw me. My wife wasn't looking for one date, but many, and had been for a long time. "She's done this before," I said, stunned. I raised my eyes to Frank. "Can you tell me how long she's been on this dating site? I mean, that's the way it is, isn't it? Maybe she's doing it for the money?" I recoiled back in horror, half expecting Maeve to appear on the live feed from the camera. Frank turned the laptop toward him and began to mouse over the touchpad. "As far as I know, it's just a dating site, nothing more." "Oh, as I see you've already figured out." He walked around the site some more. "Well, it's not set up like she's running a business. These sites are full of pros and semi-pros, but I don't see any warning signs." He added embarrassedly, "I guess she can ask for advice from the guys who answer her directly, but everything points to her doing this for fun." He looked at the screen again and changed the subject. "Okay, here comes an interesting variant. She also thought that once would be enough," I growled. "If it really was only once." My shock was turning to anger. "And she's having a whole damn weekend while I'm away? She tells that bastard she can make room for him?" "Whoa, Matt, whoa. It's not like she has a calendar here so you can see when she's free. It's like a pop-up site designed for speed dating, not long-term relationships." "Make a date with her," I said. "What?" "On her profile page, it says this pop-up site is about to close. Swipe right or whatever the hell it is, and see if she's available for a date this weekend. I want to know if she's really having fun while I'm up here in the mountains." Well, I could try to get a date, he said, though it was clear from his voice that it was the last thing he wanted to do. But I don't fit the description, and she seems to be serious. She wants to see a picture. It hit me again. She wants to see a picture of me. I wondered what she would say if she got it. Next chapter. I told Frank about my idea to set her up on a date using my picture, and he said he thought it was a good idea. Don't be one of those knuckleheads who lets it happen when he has a chance to stop it. I then reminded him that it was too late if she had done the same thing a month ago. That got him thinking. Then I said I could still ruin the fun of this month by writing in the chat room that I was coming home with a rifle and would be on the lookout for any assholes talking to my wife. Then he changed course and said it was probably best not to warn her. Look, she said she has Friday and Sunday free, so she'll make a date for that time. Frank and I took Friday and Monday each as vacation days to get the maximum amount of time to hunt on our licenses, so I wasn't expected home until Monday afternoon or evening. If you intervene in the conversation now or text her on WhatsApp, she'll have all the time before you get home to get her lies and bullshit together. His voice took on a distinct tinge of anger, and I remembered that his wife Tracy had seemingly left him out of the blue, only to find out months later that she'd had a long-standing affair with her boss. But if we go there now, you'll get there early enough to stop all this crazy nonsense, and you'll also be able to catch her cold and in person with proof. He nodded and grinned as he looked at a little girl's profile on his laptop. It was a little over 3 hours from home, and we discussed all of our options as we drove along the mountain roads and then the highway. The conversation was about how to prepare Maeve for tonight at our house, how to follow her to where her dates were scheduled, and how to ambush Dad when he arrived for his date. But the most serious conversation was about the divorce, which will probably take place whether or not dating is stopped this weekend. Frank's experience with divorce law was not a pleasant one, but his painful experience will hopefully be my defense against the worst. 2 hours later, we were on our third repeat of everything and drove the rest of the way in mostly silence. When we pulled onto my street around 10:45, Frank slowed down, preparing to stop in front of my house, but I said, "Keep going." He glared at me, but without saying a word, he pressed the gas pedal again. "Turn the corner and stop," I commanded. He did so, then looked at me again. There's a car parked on the street across from our house. I don't recognize it, and no one parks on the street here at night. Everyone parks in the driveway or in the garage. She's already started and she's doing it in our own house. Reaching for the doorknob, I said, "Thanks, buddy. You can get the hell out of here." "Screw it, man. We have a plan. We either go check it out together or we leave together and deal with it tomorrow." "No, I need to know that now," I said. "One way or the other." "Come on, Matt. We've already talked this through. If she's alone, it won't prove anything, but you'll still be screwed up in the head, and who knows what you'll say or do." "I need to know," I repeated. "Okay, plan B," he said, and put it in gear. Maeve and I live in a quiet neighborhood with a lot of older people, so there's no traffic on the streets at night, and many houses don't have lights on. Frank spoke forcefully as we made our way to the alley that ran behind my house. Whether she's alone or not, we do the same thing. We look around and then we go to my place. My own divorce taught me that this is all very serious. You have to think hard before you pull the trigger. He must have suddenly remembered my Sacco Finlight 308 caliber deer rifle lying in a crate welded to the back of his truck, because he quickly added, "Figuratively speaking, of course." Of course, I thought. Frank parked at the far end of the alley, and we walked in silence toward our house, keeping in the shadows. I lifted the lever on the outside of the alley gate, hoping Maeve had forgotten to lock it after putting out the trash cans for tomorrow's pickup. As usual, she had. The latch opened easily, and we slipped inside, behind the big oak tree. Our bedroom was in the back left corner of the house, that is, right in front, and we could see a faint light behind the curtains. Frank and I moved as quietly as possible, not picking up our feet, just shuffling them forward so we wouldn't hear the crackling of fallen leaves underfoot. Our bedroom windows faced both exterior walls, and we crept up to the larger one at the back, Frank to the left edge and me to the right, near the corner of the house. I hoped to peek inside, but the curtain was doing its job in blocking the view. From 4 feet away, Frank shook his head, letting me know he couldn't see anything either. Say! I moved toward the house and saw a line of light in the middle of the window. The curtains weren't fully drawn. I crept over and stuck my eyeball through the gap. I could see the bed clearly from the side. The bed, Maeve, and some old asshole. I was a second away from smashing the window with my fist when I remembered the Leathermen on my belt. It would do a much better job of smashing their deceptive world. I managed to open the top of the holster before I felt someone's hand on me, preventing me from pulling out the multi-tool. It was Frank. He put his finger to his lips and then grabbed my wrist to pull me away from the window. I resisted and was about to push or punch my best friend when suddenly he let go of my wrist and I fell back on my ass. I looked up at him and he threw his hands up in the air, turned around, and started walking towards the back gate. I caught up with him halfway down the alley and we walked together to his truck. I stopped beside it and looked at the vinyl upholstery, imagining there was a lockbox underneath. I knew it held not only 2 rifles, but a .357 Magnum and 2 cans of bear spray that we carried for protection in the mountain woods. He ignored the pleading in my eyes and reached for the doorknob. "We've been here too long," he said. When I followed him and closed my door, he started the engine and drove out of the alley. There was a grocery store 3 blocks away where our alley intersected with a large avenue, and he pulled into the nearly empty parking lot. The store closed at 10 o'clock, and probably only the employees' cars were still there. "Why don't I go in there and kick some ass?" I asked. We'd already discussed all this on the way back from the mountains, but I needed to hear the voice of reason again. "Because you'd end up in jail," he said, as he'd said several times before. "Besides," he continued, "it's not his fault. Sorry, dude, but he didn't seduce her like Tracy's asshole boss. Maeve invited him there. He probably doesn't even know she's married. And I need to proceed cold and cautiously if I want to get out of this marriage to my best advantage," I said in a dead, mechanical voice, repeating Frank's mantra from the ride home. Next chapter. Back at Frank's apartment, the first thing he did was lock all the guns, including the bear spray, in his gun cabinet. He strictly forbade me to go near the guns while I was still in shock. Then we sat down at the counter separating the kitchen from the living room. We may have limited ourselves to drinking in the cabin, but now Frank poured us each a shot of tequila, which we tipped into ourselves, silently proclaiming a toast to the screwed-up world. Then he poured 2 more, but we drank them down, washing them down with cold Pacifico beer. "She's cheating on you, with you," Frank pondered, returning to the strange, bewildering nature of the mystery, as we'd come to call it. "Maybe she's trying to get that spark back when you first met?" he suggested. "I wasn't 55 when we first met. And besides, it's not like our bed has gone cold. Maybe she really loves you and only wants you. But more of you? Maybe she thinks daddy is the best way to explain why she wants that particular type." I puckered my lips and shook my head to tell him what I thought of that idea, but he continued on, trying to turn it into a viable theory. I finished my tequila. "What if you didn't reprimand her for it, but instead brought up the idea of, opening up the relationship a little bit? If you helped her take care of her needs together instead of her sneaking around, you could control the situation and get some weirdness yourself." I cast another glance at him. This one said, "That's not going to happen in this universe." Then I held out my empty shot glass to pour another. Unsurprisingly, we overslept on Friday morning, but once we woke up and recovered a bit, we got down to the parts of yesterday's planning that still made sense. First, Frank drove me to the car rental agency, and I took their most unassuming sedan. Then I went to the bank, the services of which Maeve and I did not use. At the bank, I opened a checking account, using money from the trip that I had withdrawn from an ATM back on Wednesday. I was able to get an ATM card from the new bank on the spot, and the credit card was promised to be issued by the following week. The bank teller who helped me looked to be in his 30s, which is only a few years older than me. He didn't wear a wedding ring, but had a general expression on his face like a hunted dog. I had to give him a utility bill or something to confirm the address I wanted to use, since it was different from the one on my driver's license. But when I told him I was getting ready to get divorced, he immediately took pity and put in the condo address with no problem. I got the look on his face right. Here was another victim of the marriage wars. The guy walked me through downloading the bank's app to my phone, and before I left the branch, I transferred half of our savings account and 20% of our checking account to the new bank. I had planned to do half of everything, but the moody banker, whose name was Jim, reminded me that until I got rid of the mortgage, car loans, and credit card payments that automatically came out of our joint account, I needed to leave enough money there so I wouldn't ruin my credit rating on the way out. Apparently, he's seen some crappy stuff in the trenches of divorce. I thought about going to work and asking HR Finance to transfer my direct deposit to a new bank, but two things stopped me. First, I didn't want to have to explain why I was still in town and not away on a hunting trip. Second, I was going for some pretty drastic measures out of an abundance of caution, but I still didn't know what the hell was going on to ruin my 4-year marriage. The change in direct deposit and insurance beneficiary could wait until Monday. From the bank, I went to the T-Mobile store and bought a dual SIM phone with a top-of-the-line camera. I would be able to insert the SIM card of my current phone into the new one if necessary. For now, I kept the two phones separate, including putting a new contract in my name with my new address and bank account. I didn't want to make any changes to our family account yet, because that might trigger a text message from Maeve and alert her to what I was up to. Frank and I weren't due back until Monday night, and he convinced me to use that time to my advantage, despite the still strong desire to just walk through the front door and rip that cheating whore apart. "Sir? Sir, is everything okay?" I blinked and realized I was still sitting at the table with the T-Mobile employee. She was explaining how to switch between two SIM cards, and I was obviously following my dark thoughts, dreaming of retribution, and that dream was obviously giving me a scary look. "I'm sorry," I said. "I banged my knee yesterday, and these flashes of pain pierce me sometimes." "Oh, that doesn't sound good." There was skepticism in her voice. "I hope you feel better soon." Then she moved on to her examination, and I walked out of the store, limping. Frank and I met at Starbucks, and over a cup of coffee, we discussed the next phase of the plan. Then we headed back to my neighborhood to put it into action. We left Frank's big, eye-catching truck in the same supermarket parking lot where we had parked the night before, only now there were plenty of cars to hide among. Frank drove us in my rental car down 3rd Street to my house. This time, as we drove by, my car was still in the garage, but Maeve's car was gone. Nor was the red Hyundai Accent parked at the opposite curb. We reached the alley, and I jumped out and went through the back gate, which Maeve still hadn't locked. My first thought was, I really need to talk to her about this. Sure, it's a nice neighborhood, but she still needs to take basic precautions. Then I thought, damn, am I worrying about this? I shook off that confusing train of thought and decided I was lucky she was careless about security. Sure, I could have let myself right in the front door, but the retired neighbors might see me and then come up and ask why I was already back from hunting, or mention it to Maeve later. Best to stick to the spy shit for now. Frank went to take up his post in the supermarket parking lot. 95% of the time, Maeve and I got to our house by going down Tompkins Parkway in either direction and then turning onto 3rd by the supermarket. Keeping an eye on the house during the half hour I was supposed to be there was a little paranoid since Maeve is supposed to be at work, but better safe than sorry. At least I won't have to worry about fingerprints, I thought, as I unlocked the back door and entered the back room. The utility room had a hatch to the attic, and I used a pole with a hook on the end to fumble for the ring and lower the folding ladder. As I poked my head through the hatch, the walkie-talkie on my belt beeped twice. It was part of the pair we used to communicate while hunting. The double beep was Frank's signal that he was in position. Every 10 minutes he would give me another double beep as confirmation and countdown. I paused and jammed the transmit button for a long moment to confirm we had a good connection. The attic was too generous a name for the storage room under the eaves. I had to crouch and duck to get across. Fortunately, the luggage I was looking for was only a few feet from the trapdoor. I grabbed a canvas gear bag and an old backpack-style briefcase. I had bags downstairs that I liked better, but I wanted to leave as little trace as possible that I had been in the house and taken some things. I closed up the attic, checking for any finger or footprints from attic dust. My next stop was the alcove in the living room that we had turned into a home office. I pulled my passport, social security card, will, birth certificate, and marriage license out of the small safe and put them in a briefcase. The envelope contained $2,000 in cash, and I took half of it. There were also gold coins in there worth about $5,000 at today's prices. I knew the likelihood of Maeve opening the safe was practically zero, but I didn't want to inadvertently call the police if she noticed it missing, so I left them in and only took the purchase receipt. The next double key from Frank informed me that I'd been inside for 10 minutes, so I'd wasted a good amount of time. I moved on to the bedroom. I didn't feel like going to work on Monday in cargo pants, a flannel shirt, and worn Timberlands, so I grabbed a pair of black slacks, 2 dress shirts, 2 ties, some dress socks, and an old pair of black loafers from the far closet. Too few items for Maeve to notice the absence. Now for the hard part. While we were at Starbucks, Frank and I played with my new phone. We finally learned how to take time-lapse pictures and back up our data. Shooting in time-lapse mode meant no sound, but we didn't think it mattered. Watching her having fun would have been unpleasant enough without it also being audible. Besides, we didn't think critical pillow talk would give away Maeve's devious plan. I placed my new phone on a cabinet against one wall, peering into the gap between my baseball cap and straw hat. I took a few test shots until I found a position where the phone was almost hidden, but still captured 80% of the bed. Then I set up a time lapse and set it in place to capture the evidence of the destruction of my marriage. Before I left the bedroom, I pulled the edge of the curtains on the window where Frank had tried to peek, creating a small gap that would allow peeking from there next time. Of course, I didn't tell Frank about this part of my plan, because he made it clear that peeking was no longer a good idea. And then, as if his ears were blazing, Frank relayed another 10-minute warning to me. I gave him a confirmation signal and then moved into the living room for my final assignment. In another upgrade to his Uncle Bob's hunting cabin, Frank had installed several trail cameras to keep an eye on the game. We had grabbed one of them before we came down the mountain, and now I had mounted it on a tall bookshelf to get shots of the sitting area in the front room. It was motion sensor powered, and with a freshly charged battery and an empty SD card, I was confident it could cover the entire 3-day weekend. I'd have to pull out the SD card later to get the pictures, while the bedroom phone had to upload them to my cloud account every 6 hours. I returned to the alley with 2 minutes to spare and got Frank's last signal, 2 double taps on each other, as I walked into the store parking lot on the opposite side from where he'd parked, eagle-eyedly watching the corner of 3rd Street and Tompkins Parkway. Next chapter. We had both gone through the KFC drive-thru and were now sitting at Frank's lunch table with food and papers scattered about. We each had notebooks with to-do lists and brainstorming notes. It was like a planning session for a hostile takeover of another company, which I had participated in as a business analyst on more than one occasion. I didn't have much of an appetite, but chicken tenders and fries were an easy snack. I was more interested in the double shot of Jack that Frank added to my Coke. "Okay, you should text her," he said. "Gotta keep things normal." Maeve knew the cell signal in the mountains was crap, and hell, she was probably counting on the fact that the lack of connection wouldn't prevent her from interrupting her date with an awkward call from hubby. But our tried and true method of partial communication was to always have a text sent, just in case I hit a streak while wandering through the mountains, and the phone was able to complete the sending process. I stared dumbly at the message screen. What the hell am I supposed to say? "Give me this," Frank said, snatching the phone from my hands. "You're going to say what you always do." He scrolled back a few pages, apparently taking a closer look at our usual text baloney. "Oh, ho, you're naughty." "No, we're not going to say that." "Okay, here they are, the usual texts on the run." He spoke aloud as he typed. "Hey, babe, we got here without any problems. The weather seems good. We'll be out on the trail early in the morning. We'll text again later. XOXO, Matt." He hit the send button and then started typing in a new number. Okay, next call is to my and your, if need be, lawyer. Frank said that Kelly DeWitt had saved him from more abuse in a system that favored the wife, even if she'd screwed it up herself. He also noted that even though he knew he was losing in court, he was pleased to see that Tracy was clearly upset that her husband's divorce attorney was a 30-year-old woman as beautiful as herself. The phone was picked up in DeWitt's office, and I listened as the attorney apparently got on the line, and Frank took a couple minutes to exchange a few words and introduce me. He handed me the phone. "Hello, Matt?" spoke a pleasant contralto. "I'm afraid Frank didn't tell me your last name." "This is Karis, but please call me Matt." "Okay, Matt. Well, first of all, my condolences. I understand this all happened unexpectedly and pretty ugly." "Yeah, pretty damn ugly. Oh, please excuse my language." She laughed. "Don't worry about it. If you can't blow off steam with your lawyer, who can you?" I still felt bad about my mistake, but relaxed a little at DeWitt's words. Frank had told me she didn't like to be cocky, had warned me about it, so I let go of my anxiety. "So, are you my lawyer? Do I need a lawyer?" "Well, let's start with the second question. I realize this is about infidelity. Are you willing to forgive that and possibly resolve it with counseling?" "Hell no." "Good. Then are you willing to use the court's online system and file on your own? You have that right." "That's only for people who aren't at fault, isn't it? I can't take the case to treason?" "That's right. If you want to file for a no-fault divorce, you'll have to go through the hearing process. And if you want to use infidelity to affect alimony and the like, I'd strongly recommend getting an attorney involved." "Okay, Kelly, that's what I thought. So, can you represent me? Frank says you did the right thing by him." "Sneh, did Frank tell you how much it cost to get our firm involved?" "He did." "Well, I'll tell you what, Matt. Our prices have gone up a little since then, but since you're consulting Frank, I'll charge you the same as he did. Sound fair?" "Yes, I agree. When can we meet?" "Matt, this is going to sound a little cavalier, let's put it that way, but I'll be honest with you. If what Frank told me is true, it's a very interesting case and I'd like to pursue it. I can fit you into my emergency schedule on Monday morning if that would suit you." I put my hand on the microphone and said quietly to Frank, "She wants to start right away because the case sounds interesting." He grinned and shrugged. "I told you, man." "Miss DeWitt," I said. "Yeah, that would be great. Should I bring my proof?" "Your proof?" she asked. "Do you already have your proof? I take it you just discovered the deception." "Yes, but we took screenshots of her online profile before it closed, and Frank and I both saw her doing it with some guy last night. And today, I installed a camera in my bedroom that should catch any other bad behavior over the weekend." "So she actually advertised online looking for partners?" "She said if a guy caught her eye, he'd get a really hot date." DeWitt thought for a moment. "And she was looking for guys who looked like you?" "Yeah, I still don't know what the hell that all means." "Look, Matt, I don't want to get ahead of our meeting on Monday, but I just want to ask, haven't you ballooned to 300 pounds since you got married?" Yes, Frank had warned me about Kelly's bluntness, but it still caught me off guard, and I answered her blunt question directly and with a slight rebuke. 6 feet, 180 pounds, which is 5 pounds heavier than when we got married. But now I lift weights more and run less. I did 2 10K runs last month, though. As for the second one, it's 6.5 inches and still good for 10K. After a short pause followed, "Good, that's good to hear." "Okay, Matt, after we hang up, I'll open a secure data transfer site for you and send you the login code. Frank knows the portal address. Go ahead and send me any evidence you have, and I'll review it before we meet. 11 o'clock Monday will be okay with you?" 11 o'clock Monday, yes. I'll see you then." "And Matt?" "Yes?" "Let me add my advice to what Frank told you. Stay away from your wife until we meet. I'd prefer that you don't return to your home either. I only practice family law, not criminal law. Okay?" I paused for a moment. "Okay." After I got a secure code from the lawyer and we sent her screenshots of Maeve's pop-up profile, Frank got busy spying on my phone. My treacherous wife responded to my message almost immediately. Miss you, but hope you're having fun. Happy hunting. Love you, Maeve. Now my divorce coach was typing the next message to Maeve, letting her know we hadn't gotten a deer yet and were getting ready to crash for the night. Then he took the phone into his home office, opened the safe, stuck his hand with the phone deep inside, and closed the door, pressing it against his forearm. It'll act like a Faraday cage, he explained. I'll press the send button, but the signal will be blocked, so the phone will keep it on. Then I'll turn off the power. You'll wait a couple hours, turn it back on, and it'll be business as usual. Message delayed until the phone finds an errant signal in the mountains. You read too many spy novels, I said. But inside, I was glad he'd helped me. Forgetting that Faraday cage crap, I wouldn't have even remembered to keep sending messages to Maeve, so she'd think I was still in one piece and out of her sight. Frank then told me about all of his financial dealings with the divorce, including how he had to cover the mortgage on the house where his ex-wife still lived and pay spousal support for 3 years, theoretically so that Tracy could get the education and training necessary to find a better job that would allow her to get closer to the standard of living she enjoyed while living on Frank's salary. Unfortunately for him, Frank only found out about the fact that she had been leaving him for almost a year after she had gotten rid of him, and all the court judgments had been rendered. Now, even though she was still regularly copulating with the married bastard, on paper she was living alone, and Frank couldn't argue that she no longer owed her support. I hoped that Maeve's outrageous infidelity would save me from having to fund her whore life as Frank had. We began to apply Frank's hard-won knowledge by doing what people do in such cases. I didn't incur much expense or loss by closing investment accounts and the like, but since I handled most of the family's financial affairs, I had all of Maeve's logins. First, I changed the passwords for those logins. Then, I changed the contact number on all the accounts to my new phone and changed my email address to mine. As with the home safe, I didn't expect her to try to get in there, but when things went belly up, I didn't want her rushing in to grab my money. I canceled our 2 additional joint credit cards, paying them off with a joint check. The only one left was the one she used for everyday spending, and on that one, I lowered the maximum limit. We finally approached the 6-hour mark when I started recording from my new phone in our bedroom. It was time to check out the first data dump to my cloud account. I nearly lost my KFC when I saw what my wife's whore life included. I programmed my new phone to show up every 15 minutes, starting at the beginning of the hour, and take 6 pictures 30 seconds apart to capture the 2.5-minute span. 15 minutes later, the bed was still empty, but it had already been made up. I went back to check, and yes, the pillowcases were different, so Maeve had obviously changed the bedding. There were 11 more groups of pictures. 6 were blank, 5 had 2 other lovers pictured on them. I need to get out of here, I moaned, swallowing bile. Yeah, Frank agreed. Come on, I'll buy you a drink. No, I need to be alone. I don't think that's a good idea, Matt. Damn it, Frank! I need to throw up! I need to cry! I need to be alone, okay? I understand, I really do. But getting caught driving drunk or getting your ass kicked by another asshole isn't going to make anything better. I assured him I'd stay away from both the bars and my house, just get on the highway and drive. He didn't like that, but what could he do? He agreed to send pictures of every daddy to Kelly DeWitt. Before I left, he reminded me to turn my phone on so Maeve would get my last message and so he could check on me. I thanked him again and headed out to break my promise in a half. I did stay away from the booze and got on the highway to drive. However, I only drove 30 minutes north and 30 minutes back to allow dusk to turn into a full, dark night. The supermarket was still open, so I parked among the shoppers' cars and retraced my earlier steps, walking down 2nd Street a couple blocks to Elm, then halfway to 3rd and into the alley that ran behind my house. This time, the trash cans were in the yard, and the back gate was locked. Still, it was only a 6.5-foot high wooden fence. After checking the neighbors to make sure no one was in the yard, I sprawled out and swung over the fence in a second or two. Once I landed, I crouched by the fence, listening to see if there was any disturbing sound. Then, I retraced the steps Frank and I had taken the night before and crossed the yard in a hunter's stride until I hit the back wall of the house. The gap between the curtains I had set up earlier that day was still in place, and I had a clear diagonal shot of our bed from its lower left corner. In the last two pictures I'd looked at, the bed was empty and made up, indicating that Maeve was taking a break between dates. That wasn't the case now. I was already headed for the back door when the phone in my hand beeped. An incoming message. I ignored it. I had already stepped onto the first step of the back porch when the phone vibrated and buzzed with an incoming call. This time I looked at the screen. Frank. I dismissed the call. I jumped up and almost shrieked when I suddenly heard it. "I see you, asshole!" booming out of the darkness behind me. I turned around. There, looking at me through the back fence, was Frank. He must have been standing in the bed of his truck. "Get your ass over here or I'll start honking." I crept toward the fence, making a lot more noise than I'd like, but if I didn't get this asshole out of the alley, 911 would be called a bunch of retirees make the best neighborhood watch. "What the hell?" I hissed at him. "Exactly," he hissed back. "She's in there with some damn toy soldier. I'm going to teach him some manners." I was seriously flustered. "Get your ass out of here or I'll call the police myself." But now. Bastard. I had rungs on this side of the fence, so I didn't need to accelerate to get over them. I jumped into the bed of his truck, landing with a good thud, and saw the two back porch lights burning next to my house and across the alley. Bastard! We got in the truck, and Frank drove out carefully and quietly, keeping the headlights on until we turned onto the street. We were at a bar on Tompkins Parkway, 2 blocks from the supermarket. We sat in a back booth, and Frank made me drink a shot of Jim Beam and take a long sip of Bud before he let me talk. "I've had enough. She's turned my house into a goddamn whorehouse. I'll never be able to sleep there again, but I'll be damned if I let that disrespect continue." "Okay, then let's stop it." With that, he seriously caught me off guard. "What?" "Give me your phone." He held out his hand. I flipped it open. He went to my contacts list and tapped the top entry. Maeve. When the phone started ringing, he put it on speaker. It went through 5, almost 6 rings. Then my wife picked up the phone, gasping. "Matt? Why are you... I mean, what a nice surprise to get a call instead of a text. You must really miss me." "Hi, Maeve. It's me, Frank." "Frank? Why are you calling me when Matt... Oh God, something's wrong. Is Matt all right?" "I'm afraid not, Maeve. He's had a little accident. I don't think it's too serious, but I might be taking him down the mountain tonight, and I wanted you to know." "Oh my God, what happened? Can I talk to him? What's wrong?" "Look, calm down. It's not that bad. I didn't mean to scare you because it's not that serious. I don't think it is. But I noticed that we had one of those rare moments when we'd get a good signal up there. You know, some sort of weather phenomena. Anyway, I thought I should take the opportunity to contact you and warn you." "Can I talk to him?" "Well, actually, he's asleep right now. He took a big bump on his head on a tree branch in the dark, put an ice pack on it, and fell asleep." "Hit his head. Do you think he has a concussion?" "Honestly, that's what I'm most afraid of. It's probably just a bad bump, but I'll wake him up every couple hours during the night, and if he's acting weird, I'll drive him down the mountain to the hospital in White River." "Oh my God, do I have to drive there?" "No, of course not. Like I said." At this point, Frank just stopped talking, picked up the phone and ran his thumb over the microphone, dropping it under the table. "So there's no reason." "Frank? Frank? I didn't hear the last part of what you said?" Frank stroked the microphone once more. "Lie 1 bar now. Morrow." Then he cut the call off. "Okay," he said to me. "We've stopped it." I laughed for the first time since my world exploded 24 hours ago. "I'm making conversation, right?" said Frank as we walked down 3rd Street toward my house. Yeah, I agreed again. "As long as that asshole doesn't talk non-stop." After I hung up on my cheating wife, I had a sudden urgency to find out if the prank had really worked. Frank was sure Maeve would throw the soldier out of our house and cancel all other dates if she thought I was hurt, but I needed to know for sure. He said, "Whatever the hell is going on, I still think she really loves you," and then held up his hand to stop my obvious angry retort. I know, she's damn good at showing it, but even so. As we walked from the bar to my house, he said he'd driven by my house looking for me and hadn't noticed a single car on the street. He assumed that, except for the first guy who showed up on Thursday, even before her profile closed, she had made all the other visitors park outside the supermarket so as not to arouse suspicion from the neighbors. How considerate of her to spare me that embarrassment, I grinned. Shh, I think that's him. I looked ahead and saw a man walking under a street lamp and heading in our direction. He was dressed in an army uniform and wore a camouflage cap. Frank stood up so that he was between me and the asshole as we passed by. "Good evening," he addressed the soldier. The bitch only half grunted through clenched teeth. He didn't look happy. "A little girl, all right?" Frank stopped and turned to the back of a passing soldier. The guy stopped in place and slowly turned toward us. "A little girl? I don't know." "Shit," Frank said, turning to look at me. "He does look like you when you were younger." The kid furrowed his eyebrows, and then his eyes widened as he shifted his gaze from Frank to me. "Young daddy, meet your real husband," my friend said to the stunned punk. "You like married women, don't you?" growled I. Frank took a half step in front of me. "Down, boy," he said in a low voice, clearly intending for the guy to hear it. "Gee, didn't you notice any pictures that looked like your older brother when you were at that married woman's house?" asked Frank. Now I understood his anger. My buddy had played Mr. Cool for me, but now, faced with an asshole like the one who'd turned him into a cuckold, his long-standing anguish was finally coming to the surface. She said she's divorced," the bastard stammered. "Not yet, but soon." My voice continued to sound like the growl of an enraged bear. "Oh, shit." Then the guy ran. I caught up to him. He may have been 9 years younger, but I knew I could catch up to him in a block or two, and when I did, I'd walk right down his back. "Minute!" Frank turned around and stretched his arms out in front of me. "No, man, no." For the second time in 2 days, I was close to tossing my best friend aside, but then I saw the misery on his face. "I lost Tracy to a cheater. I don't want to lose you that way too." I released the tension, but I still wanted to pounce on the soldier boy. "You've already lost the main battle, kid. If you go after that shit stain, you'll win a small one, but you'll lose the war. Attacking some kid isn't going to get you back Maeve or respect. It's just going to make you look like a public laughingstock, and then possibly jail time." I felt my shoulders slump as I watched him do the same. "Maybe I'll beat him up a little," I finally said. "Maybe in 6 months or so, after we give you a good alibi," he grinned. Frank's truck was still parked at the bar, so we sat in my rental car in the store parking lot. Waiting. Yes, Maeve had clearly kicked the soldier out before they consummated the relationship. And yes, I was in agreement with Frank's opinion that we'd managed to pour a bayonet of cold water on all of her cheating. But still, I should have known. Frank was already growing weary of my obsession, but experienced cuckold and friend that he was, he agreed to give me an hour of his time. We spent the first half at the bar, sipping beers in what should have been toy soldier time, and then settled into my car. It paid off. A Nissan Sentra with out-of-state plates pulled into the parking lot, and a guy got out of it but didn't go into the grocery store. Instead, he headed to the corner and looked up to read the street signs. That's how he ended up under the streetlight, and I judged him to be a cousin who looked like me. The asshole traveled a long way to entertain my wife, but judging by the pictures she posted on her profile, it was worth it. He headed up third, and I ran up second as soon as the corner of the grocery store hid me from view. My plan was to make it to Maple, the street behind our house, then circle the block and head back south to our house. Frank was going to give the guy a head start, and then follow him north on third, mainly to prevent me from pouncing on him in the street or finally blowing up in my house following Maeve. I waited in the shade of a big tree at the corner of Maple and Third. Don't ask me if it was a maple. The guy walked up the street, stopped to check the house number, and then turned up the driveway to our front door, striding rather briskly. I walked down 2 houses down from my house and hid behind a tree again, in the darkness between the streetlights. He rang the doorbell, then took a half step back and struck a pose. The door opened, but only partially, and I saw light pouring out of it, but I couldn't see Maeve. I could hear her voice, but it was too quiet to make out the words. I guessed what it was. Date canceled, when the door closed in Dad's face less than 10 seconds later. The guy stood frozen in place for a few more seconds, then apparently remembered how far he'd traveled to get here and knocked loudly on the door. The door opened again. It must have been on the security chain, and this time I heard her say, "I'm sorry, but it's off. Now please get out of here before I call the police." Then the door slammed shut again, and I heard the distinct click of the deadbolt. This time, I heard the guy as well. "What the hell? Hey, bitch!" He cut short his sarcastic rant when the porch light on the house between us suddenly came on. As the door began to open, he spun on his heels and swiftly strode down our path to the sidewalk. Gotta love curious retirees. Unfortunately, I didn't want them to see me, so I remained seated behind the tree while old Virgil Leonard stuck his head out the door and looked the other way at the man walking down the street. When all was clear, I hurried down 3rd, fighting the almost irresistible urge to walk up and knock on our front door myself. Frank was waiting for me around the corner of Elm, and together we headed back to Tompkins. As we pulled into the supermarket parking lot, we heard tires squealing. Someone was burning rubber driving away from the store. "You shouldn't get angry while driving," Frank said. "Very dangerous," I agreed. Saturday morning, after a restless night's sleep in Frank's guest room, I reviewed the camera footage from the night before and found that Maeve's was even more restless. With nothing new to say, I began preparing photos of Maeve's last 2 encounters to send to my new attorney's data site. "Should I include the video I took through the window?" I asked Frank. "Hell no," he replied. "What you got from the other camera is enough, and it's best if we don't tell Kelly about going into the house." "Do you think that toy soldier shit his pants?" I asked, sending the pictures. Frank grinned. "Wouldn't be surprised." Then he stopped grinning. "I just hope it's enough for him to grow up and stop showing off before he runs into a husband whose gun isn't locked up." "Damn, you just ruined my mood." "Well, let's send Kelly her alarm call. That should cheer you up." Turning on my phone and scrolling through another dozen messages and missed calls from Maeve, I dialed the message myself. "Hey babe, it's Matt. Sorry Frank scared you, I'm fine. Band-Aids, aspirin, ice and sleep did the trick. I hate to leave without the deer, so I'll stay as planned. I'll see you Monday night. Love you." I hit send and was just reaching for the light switch when the phone rang. It was my lawyer. "Hey Kelly, didn't expect to hear from you on a Saturday morning." "Hey Matt, I was just checking your website and saw that your new package came in." I covered the microphone and asked Frank, "Should I tell her?" He nodded. "Hey Kelly, I'll put you on speaker and let Frank tell you why Maeve's night ended with a whimper and not an explosion." "Good morning, Kelly," Frank said. "Good morning, Frank. What have you guys been up to?" "Did I influence you badly with my barbs to Tracy?" Frank said, as Kelly kept his mood light by inserting subtle barbs at Tracy in various documents and discussions that hinted at her promiscuity without crossing the line of accusation. "I think you'll like this," he said, and proceeded to tell Kelly about his prank call and subsequent text messages. He didn't go on about how I'd sneaked up behind the house or how we'd accosted a young soldier on the street. "I like that," she said when he was done. "And you're sure she's canceled all the other dates and won't call back when she finds out Matt's okay?" "Wait a second and I'll tell you," I said. "She just responded to my last text." I typed it in and read it. "Screw the deer. Come home. I need you. I love you. Please come home now." "I told you, man," Frank said. "Told him what?" Kelly asked. "That she really loves him, despite all this shit. Kelly, have you ever run into any real nymphomaniacs in your practice? I mean, nymphomaniacs with serious mental disorders who can't control themselves?" And there was silence on the attorney's end of the phone line for a moment, then as she obviously pondered the question. I've had clients and spouses of clients with mental health issues, but I think it's possible. And I'm supposed to accept that, I muttered. Forgive her if she claims it wasn't her fault? Kelly, you've seen the pictures. How do you think I can stop seeing them in my mind's eye every time I look at her? I don't think you can, Kelly reassured her. If she is diagnosed with a mental disorder, it will likely affect the type of divorce and how the property is divided. But I don't think any judge will deny you a divorce after she planned everything to meet these men. This conversation forced me to make a decision. Kelly, how quickly can you file the papers? I can't live with this woman anymore. Yeah, I can see that, she said. Look, Matt, I have a couple ideas, and we'll probably have to meet with her and her lawyer before we decide which trigger to pull. But I'll have something ready for us to discuss on Monday, okay? Okay. But what am I going to tell her Monday night when I don't come home? You won't tell her anything. I'll be the one to tell her. So what am I supposed to do now? I asked. I've read the list of your actions you attached to the first data transmission, and I think you've got it all covered. Anything else could backfire on the judge. So sit tight, be patient, and don't step on your own beak. Frank grinned and said, I'll tell you, Kelly, I'm doing everything in my power to keep him from doing that, but he keeps trying. Speaking of which, Kelly said, Matt, didn't you say you were still good for 10K? Frank and I froze and stared at each other wide-eyed. Was my new lawyer, who Frank called hot, asking about me not having erectile dysfunction? Yeah, I think I said something like that, I offered cautiously. Good, then run along. Bye, boys. And off she went. The phone rang again, only this time it was Maeve, and I turned it off. To take Kelly's advice and go for a run, I first had to go to the mall and buy new sneakers and other gear, since I obviously didn't bring anything with me on the hunt. Frank went for a run with me, which meant I had to stop at 3 miles because that was already well beyond his comfortable distance, since he only runs occasionally. I still felt like a caged tiger, so Frank came up with another way to vent his held-back emotions. We put the rifles back in his truck and headed toward the mountains again. This time, however, we drove only an hour before we arrived at the shooting range where we went before every hunt to shoot the rifles and regain our skills. I was shooting 4 times as much as Frank, so it was no surprise that he finished cleaning his rifle much earlier than I did and went to talk to the shooting master. I noticed that during the conversation they both glanced at me now and then. Well, what did he say? I asked Frank when we were back on the southeast road. Frank didn't mince words. He said he'd seen it before and asked me if I could keep you from shooting at anything but paper targets. I said I could. Frank kept his word, immediately moving my rifle from the safe deposit box to his gun safe as soon as we got back to his apartment. The rest of the weekend passed in torture, with Frank acting as governor, keeping my mental engine from stalling. We watched Marvel movies, but he wouldn't let me look at the spy pictures anymore. We drank really good whiskey, but he would only pour me another shot after I'd had a couple Coca-Colas, club sodas, or coffee in between. He also managed my correspondence with Maeve, keeping me from reading her messages and telling her, as he did me, that I was doing pretty well and had come very close to bagging a deer, so really wanted to continue on Sunday. Then on Sunday he sent a morning text saying that I had gotten in deeper and planned to spend most of the day in a tree stand. She's already starting to call you an asshole for not coming home, he told me with a laugh. Wait until she gets served with divorce papers, I replied. I guess some petty part of me had to be enjoying the payback, but mostly I was just so damn miserable. I loved this woman, and I'd never had any reason to think she didn't love me just as much. Maybe she really did have some kind of mental breakdown that made her love me so much that she had to hire doppelgangers to keep entertaining me over and over again? I wondered if I would need the same therapy she did. After the 4th sleepless night in a row, I woke up Monday morning feeling exhausted but firmly back in the divorce camp. For better and for worse, in sickness and in health, that was as far as it could go. Maeve had too much planning to make it happen, and too much pleasure was on her face as she was whisked away by one daddy after another. We started the day by texting Maeve that we had both been so close on Sunday, and that we were leaving again this morning and probably wouldn't be back until tonight as originally planned. I apologized again for freaking out on Friday, but she has to believe me when I say I'm fine. I said this from the parking lot of the supermarket near our house, and her response followed quickly. You let me suffer in fear all weekend, and you still can't give up that damn deer to come back early? Well, maybe you should just go with Frank to his place, because now I'm not likely to want to see you right away. I had to smile, sensing the irony in her suggesting I do what I'd been planning all along. 15 minutes later, her car came down 3rd Street and turned right onto Tompkins, her usual route to work. I drove up and parked in the alley behind our house. I wasn't trying to go completely undercover this time, but I also didn't want to incur a visit from the neighbors by parking out front. When it was clear, I went up and climbed the fence again and then entered the house through the back door. I got my camera from the living room and my new cell phone from the bedroom. Then I grabbed a full-sized suitcase from the 2nd bedroom, which served as a pantry and closet for now, and was planned to be a nursery in the future. Well, so much for that plan. My heart ached even more when I thought of how far her betrayal had gone in shattering my dreams. I filled my suitcase with more clothes, and this time took the gold coins out of the safe, as well as my laptop. I figured she had already heard the bad news from Kelly before she realized I was in the house. Back at Frank's, I pulled the SD card out of the camera and plugged it into the computer. Brushing my teeth vigorously, I went to the room I was occupying and, fully dressed, collapsed onto the bedspread. I lay like that, covering my eyes with my forearm, until Frank called me and told me the videotaping was over. When I walked out into the open-plan living room, Frank was in the kitchen making breakfast sandwiches in the microwave for breakfast with Jimmy Dean, and his coffee maker was bubbling. Ah, the bachelor life. Dad, you should take a look at the rest of the camera footage, he said. It'll make you feel better. My laptop was on the coffee table in front of his couch, and I settled in front of it. And then I noticed the shot of whiskey standing next to the Dell. 9 o'clock on a Monday morning? Another sign of my entry into the life of divorced men. Well, why not? I tipped back the shot and braced myself to look at the computer screen. Frank was right. The video from Friday night to Monday morning was far more entertaining than anything I'd seen before, and also informative. After Private Little Jerk was pointed at the door and his successor was locked out, we continued to see snippets of Maeve activating the motion sensor, pacing restlessly around the house, usually with phone in hand, talking or texting, trying to ascertain the condition of her injured husband. This continued throughout the night. Saturday and Sunday it happened again, with Maeve looking very irritated and increasingly angry as I apparently brushed off all her concerns and requests to come home in favor of getting my holy grail, a large multi-point hunter. However, I paid particular attention to the way my wife cleaned up. I hadn't noticed it in previous videos, but a few items that would normally be in the living room were missing, but were now back in place. They were mostly pictures that showed me. Frank was sitting next to me. We were eating sausage cookies and drinking black coffee. Damn, I said. She really erased me, didn't she? Guess that guard wasn't lying when he said Maeve filed for divorce. Wait a minute, go back, Frank said. Go back to the end of Friday. What did you see? I asked, going back to one of the earlier clips. Look at her hands, he ordered. Maeve was strutting back and forth across the living room, both hands raised and actively texting. What? I then answered my own half-asked question. Oh, no rings. I skipped ahead, clip by clip, to about 10:30 Saturday morning. Okay, here they are. She really did play the role of divorcee to the last. Kelly DeWitt, Esquire, had gotten up from behind her blonde wood desk to greet me when the firm's secretary directed me to her office door. Now she stood, still holding my hand after a handshake, but already stepping back. She was indeed a striking woman, about 180 centimeters tall, in a well-tailored suit that emphasized her slim but firm figure. But I resolutely kept my eyes on her. Dark amber, with a slight almond shape. She, on the other hand, was blatantly shifting her gaze from her toes to the top of her head, with a noticeable pause in the middle. 6 feet, 180, long-distance runner with a bit of muscle in the last few days. I suppose that means I can accept the rest of your self-description as true as well. Thankfully, she phrased it as a statement rather than a question, because I had no idea what I was supposed to say next. Please have a seat, Matt. I'm sure it's been a rough weekend. How are you doing? Hard, that's for sure. Anything new from Maeve? I'd sent her a few messages from my wife, including the one asking me not to come home. This just came in while I was parking the car. I held out my phone to her. Baby, please, please, please ignore my last message. Yes, I'm mad as hell at you, you idiot, but I need you to come home as soon as possible. I'm dying here without you. Please, Maddie, please. Okay, Kelly pondered. If my feelings are correct, it doesn't seem like your wife did what she did to get rid of you. What's more, I have a feeling that once she finds out that you know, she'll never try it again. Hell, she might not even try again. I'm supposed to rely on that anyway? And there's no way I can pretend it didn't happen. No, of course not. But if she explains the reason and promises it won't happen again, is there any chance you'll forgive her and continue your marriage? Kelly raised her hand to stop me when she saw my mouth open for an obviously angry response. I have to ask about reconciliation, Matt. The judge is going to insist. And I mean, I get the feeling you really do love her. I do. But I don't see how I can. You've seen some pictures and short clips, but you didn't have to sit through an entire episode of grabbing a tiger by the tail. Only later did I realize that Kelly didn't need to ask what I meant by that comment. Apparently, old Tiger Pop made an impression on Miss DeWitt, too. She simply said, I understand, yes. But like I said, I practice family law, and we have to at least figure out if the family can be saved, not destroyed. And you have to keep in mind that Maeve will likely fight to keep you two together. She won't be able to force me to go to marriage counseling, which I'll have to pay for, like she does in divorce stories, will she? Kelly chuckled. I'm sure not in this case. Okay, let me tell you what I have in mind, and then we'll need to work out the property and financial details. If you want it filed as soon as possible, we need to prepare a settlement plan. Since I'm getting a divorce for infidelity, do I still have to give her half of everything and pay alimony since my income is twice hers? Kelly spent the rest of the morning answering these and other questions, and by 1 p.m., including working on the deli sandwiches she had delivered, she had sketched out a plan that seemed to help me get out of my broken marriage with the least amount of damage to my position and finances in the future. It was time to pull the trigger, and I nodded to my trigger-happy attorney, Kelly DeWitt, to fire. She put my phone on speakerphone, then hit the speed dial button for my soon-to-be ex-wife, Maeve. The call was answered before the first ring ended. Maddie, where are you? Are you coming home? Are you okay? What the hell are you playing at, asshole? Oh God, baby, I need you. Where are you? Mrs. Karras! Kelly almost screamed to stop Maeve's rant. What? Who? Who is that? Oh my God! She screamed. Where's Matt? What happened to Matt? Mrs. Karras, my lawyer said even louder. Obviously, using my phone to call my wife wasn't the best plan. We were just afraid she'd ignore any incoming call not from me or Frank. Mr. Karras, Matthios, is fine. He wasn't hurt at all, he's fine. Fine? But Frank said, Who are you and why are you calling me on Matt's phone? Are you sure? Mrs. Karras, Mr. Karras gave me his phone to contact you because he wanted to be sure you'd answer the phone. I assure you he's doing fine. In fact, I'm afraid that Mr. Spinner's reports that Mr. Karras was injured were a hoax, and here I would like to offer you my personal condolences for the unfounded fear they have cast upon you with their antics. Kelly stuck her tongue out in my direction. A prank? A prank? What the hell is going on? I'll ask again. Who are you, and why are you calling my cell phone, Matt? Mrs. Karras, let me repeat that I'm using Mr. Karras's phone with his permission, and I should also let you know that this call is being recorded. Do you mind? Maeve's voice trailed off, still angry and frightened, but even more puzzled. It's being recorded? Why? Who are you? Mrs. Karras, my name is Kelly DeWitt, and I'm an attorney with Green Family Law in Springville. Your husband, Matthios Karras, has assigned me to represent him in the dissolution of your marriage." "The dissolution?" "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Karras has informed me that he would like the dissolution of the marriage to take place as quickly as possible, but that he has no interest in bringing the whole sordid affair into the public eye unless necessary." "A sordid affair?" I easily pictured Maeve, stunned, glassy-eyed, able only to repeat Kelly's words. I wondered if she was even standing on her feet. "Yes, Mrs. Karras. Normally we would just serve you with a divorce notice, but Mr. Karras is hoping we can reach an agreement that will avoid the courtroom. The purpose of this call is to notify you of what is happening and to advise you to contact your attorney as soon as possible and have him contact me." "Attorney?" "Yes, ma'am. Do you have a pen and paper handy, Mrs. Karras? I'll give you my contact information to give to your attorney." "What? No, I don't have any." "Okay, that's not a problem. After I hang up the phone, I'll send you a message with all my contact information. However, after that, the phone will stop working, and you won't be able to contact me or Mr. Karras through it." But I need to talk to Matt. This is all wrong. It shouldn't have happened. We love each other. And is he there? I need to talk to him. This can't be. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Karras, but Mr. Karras isn't ready to talk to you, so you need to have your lawyer contact me to relay any message from Mr. Karras. I'm hanging up now, Mrs. Karras. Please have your attorney contact me as soon as possible. Have a good day." She hung up as Maeve began to say the next sentence. "That went well," she said, as she sent a text message with her office information to Maeve's phone and then disconnected hers. Her words were sarcastic but sounded sad. "Are you okay?" I asked, though it seemed like an odd reversal of our roles. "I like protecting wives, husbands from abusive spouses, but cases like this make me sad and tired. There's something strange going on here, Matt. I think you're doing the right thing, the only way possible, but I don't sense any vindictive connivance on your wife's part. For whatever reason, maybe even her uncontrollable addiction, she's blown up the center of her life, and neither of you will walk away happy." "Screw me. I'm not even 30. Have I already seen the last happy day of my life?" Kelly shook her head and body vigorously to break out of the gloom. "No," she said. "It sucks, and it's going to suck for a while, but it's not the end of the book, just this particular chapter. As part of our services, we're going to connect you with a therapist. If you take counseling seriously and follow the advice you get, you'll come out of this much faster, so I hope you do. Ask Frank. I know he won't mind if I tell you that he waited too long to use these services, and it cost him a lot of wasted time and unnecessary pain." "Yeah, it cost," Frank confirmed a few hours later, as we ate chicken wings and chilled shrimp and Bloody Marys at happy hour at a downtown sports bar aimed at office yuppies. "I brushed it off as a bunch of psychological nonsense that a real man doesn't need, but I just ended up wallowing in my own shit like a clogged toilet bowl." "You talked to me for a while, and you could have talked to me more," I said, trying not to imagine his latest metaphor. "I know you had my back, but honestly, it hurt more than it helped. At least until I got outside counseling." "But why?" I asked. His face crinkled. "Because of you and Maeve. You were so happy, you seemed so perfect, and it made me grieve even more for what I'd lost. Especially when I realized that I had been living a lie for so long, unaware of anything." I didn't know what to say and just sipped my drink. Then, after I went to see Kelly's therapist, I was finally able to start looking at you two as a sign of hope for the future instead of a reminder of the past. His voice trailed off. "And it all turned out to be another lie," I said. "Screw me," he muttered. "Screw me," I repeated and held out my glass for a toast. We clinked quietly and drank deeply. "Hey, Matt, have a seat," Kelly DeWitt said to me for the second time in 2 days. This time, we were in a small conference room, and there were several papers spread out on a table that could seat 6 people. It was 3 o'clock Tuesday afternoon, but I wasn't at work because, having gone in the day before to change my direct deposit information and family contacts and beneficiaries, I had consulted with my manager, who had given me the day off today and allowed me to take the rest of the week off if I needed to. I spent the day mostly at Frank's house, doing apartment searches for the move. I certainly wasn't going to live in my ruined house again. We'd have to sell it if Maeve didn't want to buy me out. I'd run 5 miles this morning and another 3 in the hour before I met Kelly. I hoped the mix of endorphins and fatigue would help keep me calm during what I expected would be a test of my emotions. When she called me to set up an appointment, Kelly said she had talked to Maeve this morning and that my wife had explained the whole fiasco with Dad to her. Kelly said I really needed to hear it in person. It was too weird for a phone conversation. When the receptionist ushered me into the conference room instead of Kelly's office, my gut clenched, and I half expected to see Maeve and her lawyer sitting there, waiting in ambush for me. I must have exhaled rather loudly because Kelly laughed lightly, waving her hand toward the room as if to demonstrate that it was empty. No, just the 2 of us, she said. Just needed some space to work, that's all. When I sat down at a table in the corner away from her, she added, although Maeve herself begged me to be here to tell you all this. If this were a TV show, it would be a classic showdown. Then I guess I'm glad it's not television, I said. Kelly gave me a wicked grin. But as I thought about her yesterday after we met, I realized how glad I was that she wasn't the slightest bit like Maeve. Kelly said, I think I'm going to see a surprised and shocked expression on your face, but I can only imagine how much better it would be if you heard it from your wife's mouth. Stop escalating the situation, I said. Hear what? That she did it all for you, she said. I'm sure she got more than she expected, I said with a shocked look. What the hell? I finally said, barely stopping the profanity. The smirk disappeared from her face and she placed one hand on top of mine, where they suddenly clenched into 2 fists on the tabletop. The knuckles of the thumbs and index fingers of each hand touched their twin fingers on the other, and all knuckles turned white from the sudden squeeze. That bitch claimed I was some kind of willing cuckold? My voice rose and my hands moved to the edge of the table, ready to push off so I could stand up and... Kelly almost swung over the corner of the table and grabbed my wrist firmly. No. Oh God, Matt, no, I'm sorry, I screwed up again. I half relaxed in my chair and stared at her. I acted like a wise ass again. I didn't even think you'd take it that way. I'm really sorry. I relaxed even more and shook my head questioningly. She let go of my wrist and straightened up in her chair. Maeve didn't say anything like that. She's actually very upset that you found out and dumped her. Dumping her. I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but that's what I did, wasn't it? Then what do you mean you did it all for me? The baby, she said in a quiet, pathetic voice. It hit me at once. We'd been trying to have a baby for 11 months. Finding some guy like me to get her pregnant, since I hadn't quite pulled it off yet. I knew she really wanted a baby. Hell, we both did. But I didn't realize she wanted it so desperately that she went to such crazy measures. She was doing this to get pregnant? I asked, looking for confirmation of my outrageous conclusion. Yes, Kelly replied. Here, you need to take a look at this. She pushed a few pages toward me. It was a lab report from some medical center, dated 3 months ago. I didn't see my name or Maeve's name in it, but I recognized the name of her gynecologist as the doctor who'd made the request. It took me a couple of minutes, but I finally figured out that Dr. Wellborn had provided 2 samples from patient 25473, and in both, according to the attached chart, the counts were well below normal. Am I patient 25473? I asked. Kelly nodded. But how did she get the samples? For the first time in our short relationship, I saw embarrassment on Kelly DeWitt's face. She actually secretly took samples for analysis when I failed to get her pregnant after 6 months of trying. I said it as a statement, not a question, but Kelly nodded anyway. After she got the test results, instead of talking to me about it, she recruited guys who looked like me as donors and decided to accept their donations the good old-fashioned way. Kelly said, She said that your health insurance didn't cover art or assisted reproductive technology, which can be pretty expensive, and that you had already dug deep into your savings last year to buy the house where you hope to start your family. I closed my eyes and leaned forward until my forehead hit the desk with a dull thud. Next chapter. Oh, shit, I exclaimed, lifting my head off the table. I began tapping my fingertip diligently on the birth report. That means I won't have to pay child support if her plan works, right? Kelly's face grew even sadder. You'll still have to get tested since you're low, but not zero, she said. But it probably won't be necessary. Why not? What's wrong? My stomach clenched into a knot. After Maeve and I talked this morning and she realized she'd been exposed and you're threatening her with divorce over it, she went to see her OB-GYN. This Dr. Wellborn gave her the morning after pill for emergency contraception. But today is not the morning after, I said. She was with her first boyfriend Thursday night. She asked Dr. Wellborn to call me to confirm that this was true, and the doctor confirmed it. I didn't know how to feel about it. Maeve had made an insane effort to conceive a child, but now that she knew I wouldn't become an ignorant cuckold and raise someone else's offspring as my own, she was literally erasing the mistake. It was all so damn sad. Then came the next belated realization. She did this to me just before I left for my hunting trip on Thursday. She was clearly preparing me to get her pregnant. She probably would have jumped me again as soon as I got home to reinforce the idea that I was with her while ovulating. She took all those guys with her bare hands and would have done the same thing to me on Monday. God only knows what diseases she picked up. The lawyer returned her right hand to her left. I'd always thought a lawyer held a client's hand figuratively, but I appreciated the gentle warmth of her smooth palm on the back of my hand. Unfortunately, such sordid details are a big part of this business, she reassured me. And the fact that STDs are passed from one spouse to another is something we think about all the time. First, to keep our clients safe, and second, from a cold point of view, they can play a role in tilting any settlement in our client's favor. But apparently Maeve was thinking about that too when she made the appointment. Matt, yesterday after our meeting, I reviewed the security footage you gave me on that flash drive and noticed a strange detail at the beginning of several of her visits. I reasoned that the guy was new to her, or they'd already hooked up that time she'd apparently done it a month ago. Oh shit, I muttered. What? Kelly asked. She did it a month ago too. I still have to take the test. Uh-huh, Kelly stretched out. She admitted to that too, though she insisted it was the first and supposedly only time. She said she was only able to sneak in for one night, some story about visiting a sick sister, and only met 3 guys in 2 days. When that didn't work, and your long hunting weekend coincided with her next ovulation cycle, she decided to reach out to more donors to increase her chances of getting pregnant this time around. Again, she vowed to return to fidelity afterward. Until it's time to have a sibling for my child out of wedlock? I thought we agreed we wanted at least 2, and possibly 3 children. I shook my head, trying to shake off the heartbreaking thoughts of losing my dream family. Did you say something about the camera video and how it had something to do with STDs? Yes, Kelly picked up on it. When you watched the camera footage, did you notice how she often looked at the smartphones of her visitors shortly after they arrived? Yes, she did. I figured she was checking to see if they'd actually been invited. Kelly's face turned grim. Turns out she was checking their current STI and HIV test results. Disbelief must have been reflected on my face because she continued. Yeah, I know, right? But they get tested regularly. So what? I asked a frozen Frank after recounting to him all of Maeve's maneuvers that night over pizza and beer. You do that? Do you take tests regularly and carry the results with you on your phone? Well, actually, yes, I do. I also always go wrapped up, but I carry the labs with me. You actually go into the lab while your new friend is watching you and look up your latest results online. That way you can be sure it's not a fake health certificate in front of you. And if I ever start dating again, I'll probably have to do that nonsense too. When you start dating again, he emphasized. But yeah, I'd recommend it, man. I gotta say, he continued, I'm surprised Maeve's lawyer let her spill so many details early in the negotiations. Well, that's because she doesn't have a lawyer yet. Kelly apparently discovered her in front of her office this morning and insisted on talking to her right away. Kelly again advised her to get a lawyer, but Maeve was convinced that once I knew the truth about her actions, I would call off the divorce and lawyers would no longer be needed. And how did that work out? He asked wryly. Kelly said that almost to the very end of their meeting, Maeve talked as if she thought her whole plan made so much sense and actually showed how much she loved me that I was coming home to her tonight. In response, Frank offered me another beer as we sat in the kitchen of his apartment, where I expected to stay until I decided if I could even continue to live in the same town as Maeve, let alone in the same house. A week and a half later, I was sitting in the same conference room at the Green family law office. This time, however, Kelly and I were sitting side by side on one long side of the table, and Maeve and her attorney were on the other. "Mr. Karras, Miss DeWitt," the balding man said, placing his hand on the stack of papers on the table in front of him. "I'm afraid we have two problems. First, Mrs. Karras remains determined to maintain her marriage to Mr. Karras." He paused and quickly moved his other hand over Maeve's arm as she tensed, as if about to start professing her love to me again, or throwing herself across the table to receive the hug I'd refused when they'd first entered. Apparently, lawyerly hand-holding is a real skill, and I wondered if there were seminars on it in law school. When Maeve reluctantly sat down, he continued. "Second, if reconciliation proves impossible, the proposed agreement," he tapped his finger on the papers, "is completely insufficient. It talks about a 50-50 division of property, but it doesn't include all the assets that should be considered marital, and the proposed spousal support is too small and too short-lived to significantly reduce the standard of living my client enjoyed during the marriage." I felt Kelly's foot touch mine under the table as if to say, "I told you so." I nodded my head faintly, acknowledging my mistake. Though no, I couldn't call it a mistake anyway, because it was the right thing to do. "Mr. Philpott," Kelly cut in, "I hope you're considering the fact that Mr. Karras has agreed to pay 60% of your own fees as part of the assets you count. It also shows a remarkable sense of justice on the part of a man who has been incredibly wronged. The judge will certainly take note of this if we are unable to resolve these issues here, and they are left to the discretion of the court." Yes, I was really going to pay for the lawyer working against me. I wanted this damn case to be over with, but since I really thought Maeve was deluded, not cruel, I needed her to be treated fairly. Not in the sense that she still got half of everything I owned, including a future for a while, but in the sense that she wouldn't have to move in with her parents in Idaho or to a shitty KPD in a disadvantaged part of town. But she still insisted that she didn't need a lawyer because we shouldn't get divorced, and even if she changed her mind, with her salary the best she could afford was some ambulance chaser doing divorces on the side, or some kid fresh out of law school. So I advised Kelly to find someone for her case. Not the best in town, but someone in the top 50%. "And also," my deceptively nice lawyer continued, letting Mr. Philpott's retort pass by, "when it comes to quality of life, what about my client's quality of life? You've seen the evidence, Mr. Philpott. What do you think has happened to Mr. Karras's quality of life if he has to imagine those images in his head every night?" It was a bit histrionic, but Kelly wasn't really exaggerating. I struggled. I'd already had 2 sessions with a therapist, and so far I couldn't say it was helping, but both Kelly and Frank assured me it would eventually. Ironically, the psychiatrist's consultation was covered by my health plan, even though there was no need for art, which could have prevented its necessity. "I'm so sorry, Maddie. So sorry," Maeve sobbed. Philpott squeezed her hand again. "Miss DeWitt," the 50-year-old man said, as if his much younger counterpart still had much to learn. "While I can certainly sympathize with how Mr. Karras found out about his wife's attempts, the laws of our state state that these matters do not play a role in the division of marital property or the awarding of spousal support. In the case of a petition for a non-negotiated dissolution of marriage, Mr. Philpott," Kelly snapped back, "but if your client doesn't agree to the negotiated offer to end the marriage you hold before you, then we won't file that offer if we have to go to court." She put her hand on her own pile of papers, which was considerably thicker than the one Philpott was referring to. "This petition for dissolution of marriage will be filed because of your client's fault, and the only reason will be his adultery." She slid the packet toward Philpott. "The settlement terms in this case are much less generous than the first." I saw his hand tremble, as if he wanted to open the package, but the professional held back. Okay, I'd gotten Maeve a fair enough representation. While making the facts of this case public would be incredibly embarrassing for Mr. Karras, I suspect the same may be even more true for Mrs. Karras. Especially when you consider that we will subpoena the names of all the participants in your client's multiple affairs to testify in court and conduct a paternity test on the child she tried to conceive with them. Maeve gasped, then made a sound of black sadness. Okay, stop it, shouted an indignant Philpott. There's no need to be so rude and belligerent, Miss DeWitt. You know perfectly well that Mrs. Karras has taken measures to avoid any such conception, despite her keen desire to add a child to Mr. Karras's family, a desire which he warmly shared. My baby, our baby, whispered I. Kelly not only placed her hand on top of mine, but pressed the top of my foot with her own. But it would be ours, Maeve exclaimed. It would be ours, yours, and mine. The lawyers quickly agreed to a short break to consult with their clients, and Kelly dragged me into her office while Philpott led Maeve outside for a walk in the parking lot. As I was saying, Philpott picked up as we reconvened, Mrs. Karras was brave enough to go to the drastic measures forced upon her by her husband's stubbornness to prevent the conception of a child, even though, I should add, it could have been Mr. Karras's own child. Kelly stood firmly on her feet, clearly sensing that I was ready to pounce on the table myself and pound my wife's sanctimonious mouthpiece. My attorney changed things up a bit, and her next words were softer, more understanding, and directed at Maeve. We understand that Mrs. Karras made a very difficult decision and did the right thing under the circumstances, and Mr. Karras and I recognize the pain she must be feeling from that decision. Kelly shifted her gaze back to Philpott. Unfortunately, it has not yet been medically determined whether your client's intervention was successful. It happened so late that she may indeed be pregnant. The only way to preempt my client's well-being is to prevent this threat, so to speak, at the root. I furtively glanced at Maeve. She was a naturally pale woman, but now she looked terribly gray, and I was afraid she might faint and fall to the floor. Kelly continued. There is a provision in the no-marriage proposal that would deem the paternity of any such child as not belonging to my client. However, Mr. Karras will agree to take a paternity test to confirm that assumption. If we have to go down the path of guilt, we will naturally demand the same of any of the child's possible fathers. Kelly wanted to add something like, if she decides to carry the baby, but I vetoed that. There was enough blood on the table already to twist knives. Now it was Maeve's turn to press her lawyer's hand. Apparently, they'd been discussing their next steps during the break. All that aside for now, Philpott said, we'd like to go back to Mrs. Karras's first position, not to file any of the divorce petitions. Instead, she and her husband should go to counseling together and together find a more acceptable solution to resolve their shared desire to start a family. Damn legal dictionary. Damn lawyers. Why couldn't she have done this from the beginning? I almost howled. Why not just tell me that instead of turning into a lecherous whore? Mr. Karras. Matt. The three voices sounded over each other before I slammed my fist on the table. I stared at the wooden surface and slowly said through clenched teeth. I'm already in counseling, I said. My therapist says the why question is like a funnel, and I can't heal until it fills up, or at least stops growing further. He suggested that I ask Maeve to join us for one of our sessions in the future to address this issue. But now here we are, and I need to know. Why did you choose to bring strangers into our bed instead of just telling me about a medical problem we were supposed to be dealing with? My client didn't, Philpott started to say, but Maeve interrupted him. I didn't want to hurt you by telling you that you can't give me a baby. It's just that you're so into your physicality, and I didn't want you to think you weren't that kind of man, insisted Maeve. Oh my God. Am I really such a big asshole? I asked, wondering if I was so unaware of myself that I'd never noticed such a glaring character flaw in myself. No, she repeated. I say all this wrong. She took a breath and exhaled. If we could afford IVF, I'd tell you. But we would have had to either go into debt or wait a few years for the money to come in, and we really wanted to start a family now. So it was just an exercise for you with the donor. It wasn't about breaking out of the monotony of marriage by being with other men. Exactly, exclaimed Maeve. Oh God, why would I ever want to run anywhere? So you haven't been enjoying yourself? She flinched at this word, but continued discreetly. Don't you see? Yes, I called them folders on my page, but they were really all you, weren't they? Any memories I had were connected to you, like in Multiverse in those comic book movies you love. I could add the memories of doing it with you, younger or older, to the wonderful memories I have of doing it with you now. And when you thought back to those encounters, perhaps feeding the child that one of those alternate selves had put inside you, you always thought of your real self? She couldn't resist another grimace at my barbed words, but continued, Yes, always about you. I turned my head and looked determinedly at Attorney DeWitt. She raised her eyebrows slightly in question. I nodded just as silently. She reached for the other folder circled in red, the nuclear option folder. As I spoke, Kelly slowly pulled out a series of photos and placed them side by side in front of Maeve and her lawyer. The 8x10 color photos Kelly laid out were from the front and back cameras in the house, as well as one of the videos I had taken Friday night while spying. I noticed that my wife's complexion changed from gray to green. Maeve's face turned pale when she finally saw her actions through my eyes. She barely made it to the trash can by the conference room door before she threw up. Epilogue. Our house on 3rd Street sold quickly, and although we'd owned it for less than 2 years, it had increased in value enough for us to pay off the mortgage and cover some of our moving expenses. I left Frank's apartment for a more work-friendly condo, and Maeve did move back to Bumfuck. I suppose the thought of running into her at Starbucks was overwhelming to her. However, she was able to move into a small apartment rather than her childhood bedroom. She wasn't pregnant. My ex had also found a decent job that allowed for a reasonable lifestyle in such an inexpensive neighborhood. I was glad, because while the child support I'd been paying for 5 months wasn't a real strain on me, I was pleased to know that she wouldn't suddenly find herself destitute when it stopped after the 6th and final month. Of course, she had brought this misfortune upon us both, and the thought of her mad betrayal still gave me no peace. But she was the love of my life, and I had no doubt that her remorse and regrets were genuine and as deep as my own. Her last letter said she still hoped we could reconcile. That's pretty damn unlikely, as my British friend would say. Still, dumping anger and despair and actively working on them was a major component of my ongoing therapy. Frank and Kelly were right. Regular counseling did indeed lead me to stop thinking of myself as a huge loser whose life was essentially over, save for another 40 or 50 years of dull gray monotony. As for Tracy, apparently her labor value in the office wasn't valued too highly by the other executives in the firm, and she ended up as a barista at one of those Starbucks where Maeve was afraid to run into me. Tracy blamed Frank for her troubles for some reason, even though there was no indication that it wasn't just an accident. Nevertheless, the police checked him out properly and found witnesses and surveillance footage that clearly showed he was at a Foo Fighters concert that night when his former rival was eating bark. So, what does the future hold for me once I'm on the road to recovery? Well, after the last amount of spousal support is paid, I will have fulfilled all of my obligations in the divorce proceedings, and Kelly DeWitt will no longer be my acting attorney. When she found out that I went to an art exhibit opening and was happy about it, she said she wished our first date had been at the gallery too. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.